All right, welcome back, everyone. This is the Examined Life, episode 2. Today we're going to talk about how to be an honorable man. Important question, I think, that's almost disappeared from the modern world. How do you become an honorable man? Most people don't ask questions like that today, right? They ask questions like, how do you become popular? How do you become wealthy? How do you get a lot of followers? How do you get admired and famous? These sorts of questions are what a lot of people in the modern world want to know. They're not always bad, but I think they miss something important. What kind of person are we becoming as we go through our lives? Are we becoming honorable or not? That's a deeper question. And back in wiser times, it was considered to be one of the most important questions a person could ask. Not how do I get what I want, but how can I become worthy of honor? You notice the difference. One's about what can I acquire, what can I get, what kind of stuff can I get, what kind of attention can I get. The other one's about what kind of person you become. Do you become a person worthy of honor or not? Not financial success, not famous, not a lot of Instagram followers. It's a question about character. We don't speak this way very often in our culture. But again, the ancient world saw it very differently. Becoming honorable to them was not just a matter of opinion. It was an objective standard. Didn't matter what some people thought. It was objectively true whether a man was honorable or not. And they thought that this is something that is becoming worthy of honor is something every human being ought to pursue. So we're going to investigate this topic today using the ancient wisdom. Because 2,000 years ago, I think one philosopher at least gave what I thought is a very good answer to this question. His name is Marcus Tullius Cicero, one of the great philosophers of antiquity. He was in a lot of turmoil in his life. Political turmoil, things like this. And he sat down to write an important book, not about politics, not about success, not about wealth, but he wanted to write a book to his son on how do you become an honorable man. And that book became one of the most influential books in moral philosophy for the centuries and millennia to come. The title of this book, I recommend you read it, is On Duties. Sometimes it's called On Obligation. The Latin is De Officiis. And it's important because Cicero believed, I think it's an important antidote to our culture, to some of the things I was saying just a while ago, because Cicero believed that honor is not built by just chasing merely success. It's built by faithfully fulfilling your duties. So today in this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through Cicero's beliefs and argument with you, not just as a history lesson, all right, but as something you can learn from, something you can apply in your life. I found it very valuable myself. I read this and I was honestly inspired, somewhat shamed because I wasn't doing a great job in all areas, but challenging, right? And I think if we are open-minded and let Cicero's ideas challenge us, we can grow too. We can examine our lives, live that examined life, and see how can we improve, right? And I think Cicero can help us do that by asking us if we are becoming someone who is worthy of honor. So here's what we're going to do. First, part one, we're going to talk about what an honorable man is and why you should care. Part two, what are our duties and where do they come from? And finally, what should we make of this modern idea that we're only obligated to what we choose? We're only obligated to what we sign on to. If I didn't choose it, I'm not obligated to it. This kind of modern notion, an exaggerated notion of freedom, because that idea is contradictory to what Cicero was saying. So we're going to examine that as well. The modern idea is right. Cicero's philosophy fails. But if Cicero is right, then I think he offers us something that our age desperately needs. I think he gives us a map to the honorable life. All right, so let's take that first part. What is an honorable man and why should you care? And to start things off, The first rule of logic is to always define your terms. You can't talk about how should I become an honorable man if I don't know what an honorable man is. So we're going to kick it off with just that. Cicero's claim is simply this. I'm going to jump right to the definition. Cicero says that a man is honorable to the degree in which he faithfully fulfills his duties. A man is honorable to the degree in which he faithfully fulfills his duties, and he is dishonorable to the degree in which he neglects those duties, right? So this is kind of a fulfillment of duty theory of honor that I think is a very powerful one. And his whole book, the De Officiis, is kind of built on this whole principle. All right, this is exactly what he says. This is a quote from the book. In the faithful discharge of duty consists all the moral goodness of life. In doing your duties, that consists of all the moral goodness in life. In the neglect of duty, moral disgrace. Let's read that sentence again. In the faithful discharge of duty consists all the moral goodness of life. In the neglect of duty, moral disgrace. Fulfill your duties, become worthy of honor. Neglect your duties, and you'll become morally disgraced. Powerful, simple. But the idea here, of course, is that character is forged in the fulfillment of duty. By faithfully fulfilling these obligations that belong to our lives, we become what the Romans called honesti, Honesti, men, people worthy of honor. You become worthy of honor. And this can, to use another term that Cicero likes to use, this condition of moral excellence is honestas, Honestas. Honestas is not just popularity. It's not that you're being admired. It's honor deserved. You have a certain moral condition about you whereby you deserve honor. You're in a state of honestas, being worthy of honor. Whether or not anybody realizes it or recognizes it, they may not know. Reputation, what people think about you, can be entirely different than what you really are. So when we're talking about being in a state of moral honor, worthiness, worthy of admiration, you're in this state of honestas. You're an admirable, honorable person, and honesti, regardless of who knows about it. It's honor deserved. So I think here's where we're getting into where our age has kind of lost its way, right? Honor is not just popularity. Honor is not just wealth. Honor is not just success. Honor is not just influence or status. Cicero rejects this entire way of thinking. It's not about what a lot of people think about some guy. It's about what that man really deserves. We all know that people can be admired without deserving admiration, right? And we also know that a man could deserve honor and admiration and not get it. The crowds can celebrate a fool, as they often do. They can praise a fraud. They can applaud a scoundrel. So public opinion is not really the measure of moral worth. This is so important for our day and age. Cicero's wisdom, I think, is so applicable to us in this, day and age of social media and status and this desire to be famous and have a lot of followers and have this sort of popularity, reputation. Reputation is what other people think about you. Honor is what you really are, right? People admire athletes today, but these guys sometimes abandon their wives. They're not honorable. The executives who become wealthy through dishonest practices are not honorable. The rap star celebrity may have a lot of followers, people who look up to him, but he's not worthy of it if he commits crimes. Right? And a lot of people have fame, wealth, influence, applause, but they don't have honestas. They don't have that grounding for real moral worth. They're admired, but they are not worthy of admiration. Right? So it has nothing to do with popularity or followers or fame. A man nobody's ever heard of. A husband takes care of his family, quietly does his job, loves his wife, loves his kids, fulfills all of his family obligations, fulfills his obligations to society, law-abiding citizen, fulfills his obligations to his country, etc. That is an honorable man. He may have no monuments erected in his name. No one may ever call him that. Doesn't matter, Cicero says. He is objectively honestos. He is objectively worthy of admiration, right? Because it's measured by his fulfillment of duty. So that's what an honorable man is, and that's how you become one, right? We'll get into more details on that in a little bit. But because this question is not so talked about today, some people might want to know, well, why should I care what an honorable man is? Why should I pursue honor instead of, say, wealth, popularity, social status, money, whatever? I mean, all these other things. Why worry about being honorable? Well, Cicero would say, I think, the answer to that question is because every good thing in your life depends on it. Every good thing in your life depends on people fulfilling their duties. Your marriage depends on the duties of the spouses fulfilling duties toward each other. Children depend on their parents fulfilling their duties. Right? Society depends on its citizens fulfilling their duties according to law. Friends depend on other friends who keep their word. Your country depends on citizens fulfilling the duties that we need by law and so on. Otherwise, society would crumble into chaos. Every stable human relationship depends on one simple reality: people doing what they ought to do. Every good in your life depends on this. The fulfillment of duty is this sort of invisible architecture of civilization. If people ain't doing what they're supposed to do, society is just going to fall apart. Families weaken when parents don't do their duties. Businesses fail when they cheat their customers or so on. Communities decay when the citizens neglect their duties. Governments become corrupt when the politicians don't follow the duties required by justice. And civilizations just decline, once they decide that obligation and duty is just optional. Right? These civilizations don't always collapse because they run out of rights. They collapse because they run out of people who take their duties seriously. And that's why Cicero still matters. That's why De Officiis still matters. Because a society that's obsessed with rights but indifferent to duty is a society living on borrowed time. I think the whole strength of our civilization depends on, measured by, the number of people who are doing what they ought to do, even when no one is watching. This is just the invisible foundation of every family, business, community, country. Our life would be chaos without it. So that's why honor matters. That's why the fulfillment of duty matters. It's because when you fulfill your duties, you contribute to the good of all. And to the degree in which you don't, you're bringing everyone else down too. The father who doesn't fulfill his duties to his kids drags society down. That's why you should care. That's why you should try to be an honorable man and not just pursue wealth, success, or those other things. That's why. That brings us to our next part now. If fulfilling our duties are so important, then what are they? What are our duties? Where do they come from? How do we find them out? Are they just chosen or are they discovered? Right? Well, Cicero says they arise from reality itself. He says that we have 4 sources we can look to. As he's writing his book to his son, he tells his son, there's 4 places, 4 sources in your life. He uses the Latin word personae, it's like a mask or person. 4 sources in your life where you will find your duties. The first one is your human nature, what you are. We are all human beings. We're all born with certain natural inclinations as human beings. We start with human nature. And there are certain obligations that arise just from our human nature alone. He gets this idea from Aristotle that there's a certain natural excellence to all things. There's a certain sort of natural fulfillment of a function or a purpose by which we can determine whether it's doing well or not. An excellent eye sees well. An excellent knife cuts well. An excellent horse runs well. What does a human being look like at its very best? We look at our natural inclinations, what our nature aims at, just in virtue of being human, and when we can see how we can fulfill those intentions and become a better, more flourishing human being. For example, every man wants to know things. We are natural knowers. We ask the question, why? We seek truth. We're also social by nature. We flourish better when we live in community with others. So one guy can focus on being a shoemaker, and one guy can focus on being a doctor. We can't do all things. We live better in a community with each other. We thrive better that way. We also have powerful desires, right? Desires of the flesh, desires to overeat, desires to oversleep. That if you don't control those, they can destroy you. Those have to be stifled according to reason, regulated. And also, in our lives, there are just troubles and hardships that have to be overcome. Right? And the perfection of these desires gives rise to the virtue. So the desire to know things is the virtue of wisdom. When we learn and perfect that rational side of our nature, we become better knowers and therefore better human beings. Right? We also live, like I said, we are social creatures. Aristotle talks about this. We live in society better. We are naturally social. Man is by nature social. We have to get along with others. Therefore, we have to treat each other fairly. The virtue of justice comes in here. Give others what they're due. Do no harm. This kind of thing. We also have to, like I said, suppress those desires. The temperance comes in here. The desire for food, comfort, pleasure, sex, recognition, success. They have to be tempered and quelled and moderated, or they get out of control and can destroy your life. You won't be flourishing then. These virtues aren't governed. If these inclinations and passions are not governed, they will govern us. And the perfection of that power is what we call temperance. Being able to be in control of yourself and not a slave to your appetites. And finally, we just know that the world has troubles in it, right? Every human being encounters pain, loss, sacrifice, fear, troubles, obstacles. These dangers are a part of life, and we have to perfect our courageous side of us to face those fears and overcome them for the sake of the good. If nobody's courageous, nobody's flourishing. We can't have a bunch of police and military who are cowards. Right? So human flourishing depends upon these natural inclinations, and these virtues arise out of those things. We can say that we perfect ourselves by perfecting these desires of nature. I become a better human when I know more. I become a better human when I'm more just. I become a better human when I'm more temperate. I'm a better human when I'm more courageous. Because I flourish, and so do others too. This is why virtue, by the way, is objective. It's not just a matter of opinion. A virtuous man is objectively speaking a better person than one who is not. It's not a matter of opinion. And that's why all these obligations that's how they all come in, is because they're obligations towards human flourishing. Obligation arises out of these virtues. It's your duty to try to know as much truth as you can, to be as courageous as you can, to be as just as you can, to be as temperate as you can. These actions, you do these actions, they become habits, and these habits become your character. This is how human nature is perfected. This virtue is just what human excellence looks like. And so these obligations that just flow from our human nature are the requirements we have to follow to make sure that human excellence and flourishing is achieved. So that's the first source of our obligation, human nature itself. Let's go to the second source. Not just what you are in general, but who you are individually. Cicero says, this is another source of your obligation. Not just your human nature. We all have that in common. But your particular goods, gifts, qualities, the things you have that I don't have, our individual nature, if you will. Nature didn't make us all identical. Not just what are you, that's one source of obligation, that's the first one. But who are you? That's the second source of obligation. Because every one of us have been entrusted with a unique combination of, gifts, abilities, opportunities, weaknesses. That individuality is no accident. And all these gifts come with a corresponding obligation. Intelligence calls for wisdom, strength calls for service, leadership calls for responsibility. The greater the gift, the greater the obligation. So these virtues are universal on the natural level, but also they're personal on the individual level. Every honorable man has to become wise, but wisdom looks different in the philosopher than it does in the physician. Every honorable man has to become courageous, but that looks different between the courageous father and the courageous soldier. Every honorable man has to be just, but that looks different in the judge, the teacher, the business owner, etc. So their virtues don't change. It's just that their individual expression does. You can think of an orchestra, right? It's a big piece of music, and it sounds beautiful together, but not every instrument's doing the same thing. The cello's over here, the violin's over here, the flute's over here. They got their individual characteristics going on that all contribute to the good of the whole. And so the moral life is no different. You've been given individual gifts. We all have that others don't have. And so no two honorable lives will look alike. It's kind of like martial arts too, right? Martial arts is about winning a fight. Certain principles you got to follow, develop speed, power, endurance, mental toughness. Every fighter has to have these. But the expression of those principles is very different. Some guys are more strikers, some guys are more grapplers, takedown guy, boxer type guy, some guys are more hands. Every fighter, everybody takes those needs of the virtues of fighting, but they express them differently according to their own abilities. Some guys are great with their hands, but their kicks suck. That's okay. It's expressed at an individual level. Not all fighters fight the same way, even though they're achieving the same goal. And the moral life is the same way. You're not called to imitate another man's personality. Your job, Cicero says, is to perfect not just your human nature, but your own particular nature, who you are as a person, the gifts you've been given. That's why I think, self-knowledge, it's not just therapeutic. According to Cicero, it's your moral duty. Find out what you're good at and make use of those gifts. You have an obligation to use those individual gifts you've been given that this person has not, to make the world a better place, right? This is what you owe. Why? Because no one else is you. That's the second source of obligation. Third source is where life has placed you. Cicero says your circumstances. You're born into a certain family. You're born in a certain community. You're born in a certain nation. You're born in a certain time. Different circumstances, different placements in the world, different world events. A lot of chance things going on that you didn't choose. You're just plopped there, You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your siblings. You didn't choose your neighbors. You didn't choose what country you're born in. You didn't choose what time period, what century you're born in. But those chance circumstances that just were thrusted upon you, those create obligations too. You didn't choose it, but they're given to you. Cicero says it beautifully this way. Non nobis solum nati sumus. We are not born for ourselves alone. You're called to respond virtuously to these chance circumstances in which you've been placed. Your family needs your service. Your community needs your service. Your country, Different things you didn't choose need your service for the common good. How can your gifts that you've been given, source 2, best contribute to the chance circumstances of the role in which you've been placed? Source 3. And the fourth source of obligation is what you freely chose. Now freedom enters the picture. Now because you've chosen things in life, you've chosen certain paths, certain vocations, obligations arise out of that too. If I choose to be a police officer, that gives me one set of obligations. If I choose to be a doctor, that gives me another set of obligations. If I choose to be a martial arts instructor, that gives me another set of obligations. If I choose to have a family, that gives me a set of obligations versus not, right? So your choices are the fourth source of obligation in your life. You want to get married? Fine. Assume the duties of a husband. You want to become a father? Great. Assume the duties of a parent. You're going to become a physician, a teacher, a soldier, a business owner, coach. Fine. Willfully accept those responsibilities then. Every promise you make creates a new moral reality. Yesterday you didn't have this obligation, but today you gave your word. New obligation. Reality's changed because of your choices. Your moral landscape has changed because of your choices if you want to be an honorable man. The honorable man, when he chooses a path, he fulfills those obligations. So those are the four sources of obligations: your human nature, your individual nature, the chance circumstances in which you've been placed, and your choices in life. So notice something. Cicero places choice as a source of obligation last. Your first three sources of obligation you did not choose. You've got obligations arising because of your human nature, obligations arising because of your individual nature, obligations arising because of the chance circumstances in which you've been placed, and then obligations arising from your choices in life. Choice does not create the whole of your moral life, in other words. You have duties that arise before any choice was made, and these are what you owe because of these are what you owe because you freely chose, but there are three sources that are prior to that. So my point here, Cicero's point here, is that obligations do not arise merely out of choice. But what I think we've got here, just take the first and the second part here, right? What an honorable man is, why it's important. The first part I talked about. And we talk about fulfillment of duty. And then we talk about the four sources of duty. That gives us something very important. We got the path. We got a map to the honorable life. How do I become an honorable man? By fulfilling your duties. Well, what are my duties? Chunk, 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 chunk. Four sources. It gives us a map. These four sources of obligations. So it's very important. We know what an honorable life is, why it's important, and a plan to get there, a map. These four realities, these four sources. From these arise every obligation you'll ever have. Ignore those obligations and your character deteriorates. Answer them faithfully, and those grounds for honor begin to take root. This is precisely how a man becomes worthy of honor. And I think it's why his philosophy is so powerful, is that, again, it's not just a matter of opinion. He gives us objective grounds for admiration. This man is worthy of honor. That man is not. And it's not a mere matter of opinion, because that man fulfills his duties and that man does not. Fact, not opinion. These are facts, not words. It gives us then an objective standard for true honor, a factual basis by which we can say one man is more honorable than the other. These are important considerations. Right? Right? The modern world asks, what do I want out of life? Cicero says, what does life ask of you? One begins with desire and self. The other one begins with reality and virtue. So that's it. That's an important map there. But then we have maybe a problem. Some people might object. Some people might think, well, what about those other three things? I didn't choose those things. Why am I obligated to do anything because I haven't chosen it? This might be the great objection, right? I didn't choose all this. I didn't choose my country. I don't want to serve my country. I don't want to serve my community. I didn't choose to be a part of them. I didn't sign on to this. I don't owe them anything. Kind of like a modern objection in the sense that it comes from, this I think an exaggerated notion of freedom. I can do whatever the hell I want. I don't have any obligations, at least that I didn't sign on to. A lot of people think that's evident today, right? I'm going to create my own identity, man. I'm going to choose my own values. I'm going to live my own truth, follow my own path, right? Freedom is the highest good anyway, right? And if freedom is the highest good, then these obligations seem to be kind of an injustice. And if you start with that idea, it kind of makes sense. If freedom is the highest value and autonomy and doing whatever the hell you want is the highest value, then you don't owe anybody jack. Kind of follows, I guess. But there's a problem. Hidden beneath this objection lies a deeper assumption that duty only comes from choice. Cicero says that's false. And the reason why is because before you ever get to exercise any choice at all, before you get to choose anything at all, you have already received everything you need to make freedom possible. You've been given a family, a language, a human nature, a culture, an education, a civilization. You didn't create your rational mind. You didn't invent language. You didn't raise yourself as a kid. You didn't protect yourself as an infant. You didn't build those roads you drive on. You didn't discover that medicine the doctor gives you. You didn't acquire that knowledge that you learned from teachers. So long before you ever chose or contributed anything to the world gave you a lot. That changes the question entirely, doesn't it? You didn't just walk into the world as an individual. You came into the world as a beneficiary, as someone that's already received a whole lot. You were born into a family, a society, a law-abiding country to whatever degree. People giving you stuff all the time, feeding you when you're a baby, doctors giving you a shot when you're sick, police helping you when you needed something. You've been the recipient of a lot of gifts. And justice realized that gifts establish relationships. Gifts require a response. These relationships, these gifts, give rise to obligations. There's a sense in which every one of us have been born into a kind of indebtedness. We're debtors. Calls for at least gratitude. Calls for some responsibility, right? So the idea here is that duty does not wait for your choice, doesn't wait for your consent. It begins with reality. Imagine a guy who really takes this objection seriously, really believes it, in other words, right? Imagine he spent his entire life receiving, right? His parents sacrificed for him. His teachers educated him. Farmers grew his food. Workers built his home. Doctors cared for him. Soldiers protected him. Generations before built the civilization that he gets to enjoy and live in. Thousands of people made his existence and life possible. And what's this guy say? Well, I don't owe anyone anything. I didn't agree to this. This guy's a louse. Right? This guy's a moral disgrace. Turpitudo, to use Cicero's term. The injustice here is clear. Right? Cicero says there's more to injustice than refusing to take what belongs to us. I didn't hurt you. I didn't go out and take your stuff. I didn't kill you. I'm just keeping to myself. Cicero says that's actually a second kind of injustice. Sure, there's the obvious one when I go out and hurt people, go out and take their stuff, cause unjust harm to them directly, positively. That's one kind of injustice, Cicero says, doing positive, unjust harm to others. But Cicero says there's a second kind. This one's more common. This one is failing to do the good that duty requires. Listen to Cicero's exact words. This kind of guy who thinks he can just keep to himself. He is just as much at fault as if he had deserted his parents, his friends, or his country. Deserted. A deserter. Deserting his friends, deserting his country, deserting his parents. A deserter? Something chilling about that word. Deserters abandon their post. Cicero says we can do that. We can desert our friends, desert our country. Not because of them direct injustice, by hurting them, not just that, but by quietly refusing the duties that were ours all along. People who do this will say, I'm just keeping myself. I didn't hurt anyone. Cicero says, like hell you didn't. Did you help the people you're responsible for helping? Right? The greatest tragedy is not always caused by people going out positively doing evil. Sometimes they are caused by otherwise decent people who never did the good that was theirs to do. So injustice can consist in doing directly positive evil, but also consists in refusing to do the good that was yours to do. Cicero saw this temptation more than 2,000 years ago. He describes people who say things like, this is a quote, they say they are merely minding their own business. Cicero's response, they abandon the fellowship of life. Minding your own business too much abandons the fellowship of life. They didn't go out and rob a bank. They didn't go out and commit mass murder. They withdrew. They abandoned society. They withheld what society had every right to expect from them, their concern, their labor, their abilities. They consumed what civilization gave them and then gave nothing in return. Deserters. Again, Cicero has that powerful word for these people, turpitudo, moral disgrace. I can't really think of a stronger word for an immoral person. A moral disgrace, not because they didn't become famous, not because they didn't become wealthy, not because they didn't impress the world, because they failed their obligations. One more important sentence from Cicero that I want you to remember. He says, it's beautiful in Latin too. Non nobis solum nati sumus. We are not born for ourselves alone. He says human beings are made for the sake of one another. Not because of some social contract you signed, but because of your nature. And from that nature, as we said, duty flows, whether you acknowledge it or not. So the modern world may say, well, I only owe what I've chosen. Cicero says, no, you owe because you have received. And again, part of this channel and program is to not just take the head knowledge and go on and not change ourselves. This is the examined life. I'm supposed to be examining my life according to what we read, and I'm hoping you're doing the same. So we have to examine our lives in light of what Cicero has said. How are we fulfilling our duties? How worthy of honor, honestos, are we? Where have we failed? Who needed your courage but got your silence? Who needed your wisdom but got your indifference? Who needed your labor but got your excuses? Who needed your love but got your absence? Where have you been receiving without giving? Where have I abandoned duties that were already ours? See, as we've been saying, honor demands that we answer these faithfully. Whew. And Cicero's verdict is hard, stings for those who fail in their duties, at least seriously so. Turpitudo. Moral disgrace. So let's wrap this up. Let's start with that big question we began with. How do you become an honorable man? Well, you become an honorable man by faithfully answering your duties that belong to your life. They come from 4 sources: our human nature, our unique personal nature, the circumstances into which we've been born, and the commitments we've embraced freely. The first 3 sources of virtue were just there. They're discovered. Only the 4th one is chosen. And then we dealt with the defining objection of our age. Well, I didn't choose this. Why did I owe anything? Well, because you've been given everything. That's why. Gifts call for a just response. You've been given a family, a language, a civilization, a human nature. You've been given thousands of stuff you've never earned or invented. And because you've received so much, you cannot live by yourself alone, says Cicero. Justice demands a response. So this should change our life, right? If Cicero is right, everything should change. Stop asking, what can I get from life? Ask, what does life ask of me? Stop measuring yourself by your achievement and begin measuring yourself by your faithfulness. We should stop asking, perhaps, what do I feel like doing? And instead, what is the fitting thing to do now? This is how we live an examined life. Learn the wisdom, look at our own lives, boom, apply it. Because someday your work's going to be finished, your conversations are all going to be gone, all your decisions are over, your reputation's gone, promises you made are kept or broken, your possessions are going to belong to someone else, your achievements, that's going to fade into history. But the one thing that's going to remain is the man or woman you became. Not the one you pretended to be, not the one people thought you were. The man you really were when no one was watching. Were you honorable or not? And did you become, you answer your duties? Did you answer your duties when it cost you something? It involves doing the right thing that requires courage, when justice demands sacrifice, when temperance requires self-denial, when wisdom called you to choose what was right over what's easy or beneficial. That is your character. I want to end with one final story, one kind of final irony, actually. When Cicero wrote this book, he wrote it in the last month of the Republic. A lot of political chaos. And he ended up on the wrong side of the political war, put it that way, which is not a good thing to do in ancient Rome, right? He chose the losing side, unfortunately for him. And so shortly after he wrote this book, he was captured and executed by those political forces he was opposing. And his enemies ordered that his head and hands be chopped off. His brain that he thought with and the hands that he wrote with. His enemies chopped that off. And they went to the Roman Forum and they posted it up there. So there's Cicero's head and his hands up there. Look what happens when you oppose us, was the message. Don't be another Cicero. Don't oppose us, And by every worldly measure at that point, it looked like Cicero lost, right? His side lost, his republic fell. His enemies cut his head off and celebrated. But you know what? It's 2,000 years later, and we still remember Cicero. We still read his words. We're still challenged by his thoughts. We're still inspired by his wisdom. So maybe you could say that his enemies won the moment, but Cicero won the history. Maybe we can say that's what honor looks like over time. All right. So I'm going to leave you with one final question. The question is not whether or not you have duties. You already do. The question for you and for me is, will we answer them? Thank you for joining me. This has been The Examined Life. Vita Examinata.